Well, the Constitutional Court will this morning continue hearing two applications challenging the constitutionality of the Electoral Amendment Act. In one, the threshold set for independent candidates to enter the national election is being challenged, while the IEC contends support must be high in order to guard against frivolity. Our reporter Heidi Giokos is following through with the story and joins us now. Good morning to you, Heidi. Yesterday we definitely saw the Independent Candidates Association placing their arguments before the courts, but give us some context in terms of what their arguments are in terms of elections and those seats in Parliament.
Yes, so this all dates back to 2020, Tumelo, when the Constitutional Court ruled that the current form then of the Electoral Act is unconstitutional, as it does not consider independent candidates to contest in the national elections, and it had given Parliament 24 months to amend that act. We do know earlier this year President Cyril Ramaphosa signed in the Electoral Amendment Act, which allowed for independent candidates to contest in the national elections. But there's a slight problem here, because independent candidates and One South Africa have indicated that there is an issue with the Electoral Act. They feel as though the threshold for independent candidates is unfair and is basically unconstitutional. So basically what's happening here is that an independent candidate that wants to contest in the national elections next year needs to get about 15,000 signatures, not votes, signatures, before they are able to contest in next year's general elections. The independent candidates have indicated that this is going to be basically impossible to do so, especially given the time frame, but also because signatures are public, they are not private or confidential like a vote would be. The other issue here has to do with the issue around the seat composition. So currently, in its current form, it's 200 seats in the National Assembly, and the independent candidates have asked for it to be pushed up to 350 seats in the National Assembly. But the argument here is that you could have a situation where there are more candidates than seats in the National Assembly, but the independent candidates are arguing that independent candidates should be in a position to contest just like political parties. But it's very difficult to do so, because a political party is obviously on a different playing field as an independent candidate is, but the independent candidates are saying it should be free, it should be free and fair and equal, just as it is for political parties. So that's the argument that's currently at play here at the Constitutional Court, and we do know that it's got to do with the Independent Candidates Association and One South Africa, who are arguing these two very important points. But time is of the essence, Tumelo, because the IEC has said whatever the decision might be, whoever it might be, whether it's the Constitutional Court that rules on this matter or whether it's Parliament that signs in this new amendment to the Electoral Act, it needs to happen fast, because elections are around the corner, and the IEC says they might not have time to adjust all its electoral systems to factor in this new amendment should it be passed.
That's right, Heidi. We definitely saw there Advocate Azar Bam representing the IEC making those representations, further saying that failed elections were a risk here should we find no solution in sight due to that time factor. But it's not just the IEC, right, Heidi, that seem to be opposing the application by the ICA. It seems the Home Affairs as well did make representations.
Yes, so basically what the Home Affairs Minister has indicated, and he was here in court yesterday, I'm not sure if he'll be present in court today, but the Home Affairs Department is basically in charge of this Electoral Amendment Act. So they need to formalise it, give it to the President to sign, and of course it's passed through Parliament. But it's also up to the Home Affairs Minister to appoint a panel to discuss and decide whether or not they are able to bring in these new amendments that have been pointed out by these two applicants, which is the Independent Candidates Association and One South Africa. So the Minister has said that they've done everything that they are supposed to do. They've gone by the Constitutional Court ruling back in 2020. Even though they did ask for an extension, they've done all that they can and all that was expected of them as the Department of Home Affairs. the minister was quite frustrated yesterday, saying that he doesn't understand why independent candidates are raising these points, because they have been given the constitutional right to contest in next year's elections, but now obviously they have these two issues that they want amended, because independent candidates feel as though they're not on the same playing field as political parties. So there's been much criticism as to how the Department of Home Affairs has handled all of this, but their legal team has really argued that at the end of the day it's got to do with the composition of seating, because it's currently 200 and they want it to be 350. So arguments are going to continue today in court. We're not expecting a long day, because it's definitely going to be closing arguments, but then it's also going to be up to the Constitutional Court to decide whether or not there is a separation of powers. There's also that issue, Tumelo, because we find that the Constitutional Court is saying it doesn't want to overstep in whether or not it should decide on this amendment, given the fact that there is the judiciary, but there's also a parliamentary National Assembly process, and it should be possibly a consideration as to whether or not the president should decide on whether or not there needs to be that amendment, or whether or not it needs to be the highest court in the land. So it's definitely going to be an interesting one, but time is definitely of the essence here.
Absolutely, and we'll have to wait and see how those closing arguments go today. Even yesterday, I kept hearing, the words perfect proportionality constantly being argued, at least from, the ICA stance. Heidi, we'll see how those closing arguments go today out of the Constitutional Court. That's eNCA reporter Heidi Giokos giving us the very latest regarding this matter between the ICA, but also the IEC and Home Affairs, bringing their opposing representation before ConCourt.